budget panel discussion on DBS Radio. It is just a little after the start. We were expected to start at 12, but there's a lot that the panelists will unearth this afternoon on this discussion. So we welcome you. The moderator is Reginald Sevre. We say good afternoon to Reginald Sevre, and then he'll kick it off. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are here to discuss balancing resilient development and fiscal discipline for sustainable growth as the 2025-2026 annual budget of the government of Dominica presented here. This afternoon, we're going to have a panel discussion and some fruitful discussions on the budget. And I would like to invite my panelists to introduce themselves, starting on the left.
Good afternoon to our listening public. My name is Aisha Challenger. Primarily, I work at the Government of Commonwealth of Dominica, stationed at the Parliament Building. I'm a talk show radio host / moderator for several events. I'm also an insurance introducer and a licensed insurance representative.
Hi, good afternoon. I am Kitwani Ferreira, president of the DHTA and business development consultant. I currently work as manager at the Island Car Rental.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Brenton Hillier, agency manager of Sagicor. Been in the insurance industry for about 15 years now. I am a licensed agent, a master financial advisor with an international organization. Outside of that, I'm president of the Chamber of Commerce. I also sit as a board member for the Dominica Bureau of Standards. So I have some aspects of dealing with both private and public sector actors, always working together. I also speak to entrepreneurs and what's the word I'm looking for? Guide some of them privately and help them to thrive in this economy.
Good afternoon. My name is Ashma McDougall, and currently I serve as the Executive Director on the Dominica Association of Industry and Commerce. Additionally, my background extends in economics and international development. I'm currently an international reader in economic development and international development, and I'm also a small business owner of an event planning company.
Good afternoon. I'm Samuel Carrot. I work at the Ministry of Finance. I have been there for a while, actually. And currently the Resilience Coordinator. Prior to that, I served as Permanent Secretary and also the Chief Development Planner. And now I'm Senior Board Resilience, ensuring that we're ready for some of these terrible storms that I noticed that are emerging in the Atlantic. And I'm happy to be here to share our knowledge and processes in terms of the budget preparation and management.
As we continue our discussions, let me just inform the general public that we're going to be looking at the budget process. We'll have some discussions among the panelists in terms of the planned spending allocations, the expectations for revenue to be raised by the Ministry of Finance for the financial year, some key fiscal policy orientation that we'll look at in terms of the budget measures that has been announced in this year's budget. Would ask them to look at anything that stands out to them in their particular field of work and have some discussions, share their concerns, share their alternative views, see any challenges in implementation, and what do they think is the intended impact of those measures for the country, Dominica, and the economy as a whole. So with this, I would like to just introduce Sam Carrot to start off and tell us about the purpose and the importance of the budget process, and just give us some background on this before we go into the identification of the key budget measures. Sam?
Because I'm of the impression that some people think that it's an easy process. It's a process that you wake up one morning and determine that you're going to do a budget. That's not how it works. So the first thing that we do way back in September of each year is to do a global scan, a regional scan, and to look at the results of the assessment, the global economy assessment by the World Economic Forum. So we take a look at that. And we look at what the IMF is saying, what the World Bank is saying. And then we come down to the region, we look at what the regional organizations are saying, CARICOM, CDB, and so on. And we look at all the reviews for the economic outlook for the following year and how that it would be presented in calendar year, but we look at how it affects the parameters would influence the fiscal year. And then we look at Dominica's performance. So the context, actually, we go international, regional, and then local. And then we look at what is happening here, and we are able to make a determination as to what are the elements that would drive our revenue or first economic growth. And then we look at the possibility of revenue collection and at what level that collection is likely to be. And we then dig into our budget. We look at expenditure pattern, revenue pattern, and importantly, with all that information, we prepare what is called a macro fiscal framework that would capture everything. And that is done very early. I remember one year we prepared it in October. It is done and reviewed by a number of persons. Each of us do a review and we give our comments. And once it's approved by Cabinet, it is reviewed by the Financial Secretary, of course. Once it's approved by Cabinet. So that's the macro fiscal framework. That is what provides the frame for the development of the budget. And so once that is done, it's approved by Cabinet. We do what is called a budget call. Based on the parameters that were approved, we then put together a budget call that goes to the ministry that describes what the budget is going to look like for the upcoming fiscal year. What are the revenues, projected expenditure, what allocation that may be able to be granted to the various sectors, and we provide a time frame for the submission from various sectors. So that is done largely by the 15th of January. So sometimes we prepare the macro fiscal framework very early, from October, November, December. So by January 15th, we would have the budget call ready for to send to the ministries. So that would guide them with their preparations. And so that's it.
At this time, I'm going to invite each of the panelists to identify some of the key budget measures that has been mentioned in the budget, and they can spend some time in explaining their take on those various budget measures. We'll start from the left.
Okay, for me, as a public officer, what really stood out is the facility that will be placed, the 10 point, I believe, $5 million that will be placed at the Government Housing Loan Board for public officers so that they can actually acquire loans to build their homes. And that is at an unbeatable rate of 2%. So I believe no other financial institution on the island, the current rate in most of them is actually 5% right now. So, but that will be only for targeted public officers. You'll have to earn less than $45,000 or less. So to me, that is really great for all public officers who are looking to build their own homes. And I believe that will be available for them, not just to build their homes, but acquire land and house. Another thing which stood out for me, again, is the inputs into agriculture, or should I say the continued inputs. Because when it was mentioned of the 5 C's, you have cocoa, you have citrus, you have coffee, you have coconut, and cannabis. So the 5 C's, there has been inputs into the cocoa sector ever since Hurricane Maria, I believe, where the government gave from digging the holes to actually when the cocoa tree matured. So for me, that is just a continuation of what already existed. And well over 10,000 plants will be available for farmers and again to upcoming farmers. But what is interesting to note is that most persons simply believe because I'm a farmer, then I'm going to benefit. For you to benefit as a farmer, you have to be a registered farmer, not an individual who simply partakes in farming, whether or not you actually sell products or you export products. So these are the two things that I genuinely loved about the budget. I mean, it goes without saying that the removal of VATs on majority of food items definitely stood out, and every single household in the country will see the benefit. But the two that I mentioned happen to be two of my favorite.
Okay, with relation to tourism, of course, I was interested in the facts that the government placed more emphasis on linkages, between agriculture, tourism, infrastructure, and the hospitality industry. The incentives that is being brought about for community tourism development, the homestays initiatives, and encouraging the communities, especially those along the Waitukubuli National Trail, to be able to invest in their own, even if it's home accommodation. Then we looked at the additional investment in destination marketing and in agriculture, because agriculture, as Aisha was saying, it's really a large part of the part and parcel tourism, agriculture. We cannot feed the nation and not feed the tourist, So that the incentives that are put in there in terms of also the encouraging the youth in agriculture was good. I applaud that, especially I come from an agriculture family as well. We have to kind of look at the increased flights, the international airport development, especially as it's ahead of the project time. We're looking at the investments in the ports, the additional enhancements of the existing cruise ship terminal, and the introduction of the new ferry terminal that's on stream. So these things are things that were encouraging for us. I have to note that the levy that was introduced for passengers coming in will need a little bit more looking at, but it's a step in the right direction in terms of contributing to the economy. We have to sometimes follow suit when we look at the international market. So these are things that stood out to us, yes.
Brenton?
Okay, for me, there were different areas within the budget I believe were good initiatives. One is the heavy investment in the youth through the aspect of the MSME initiatives. The data was shared where several MSMEs have benefited from training and from accessing the grant funding that has been made available, and we do expect that to continue, and that speaks a lot to the fact that we have a lot of persons who have become entrepreneurially minded, and that is something that within the chamber we have seen firsthand coming out of the COVID pandemic, where a lot of our members who joined after the pandemic were actually people within the MSME sector, a lot of agro-processors. So it is good that the government have realized that and have placed a lot of emphasis in it through this budget. There is the aspect of the curriculum that supports entrepreneurship that is being looked at the State College, which I believe is excellent, because running a business is not just about waking up and saying, hey, I want to start this business. There's a lot of aspects of it that people take for granted, and you really need the knowledge of it to be successful. And it has been shown throughout research that MSMEs usually contribute between 40 to 60% of a country's GDP. And we definitely need to provide whatever support we can for them to continue making a contribution and even expanding on the contribution, because an MSME today could be a large conglomerate tomorrow. So we definitely were pleased to see these measures being put in place for them. In addition, supporting agriculture, it has been mentioned previously, is a very important aspect of entrepreneurship. And the reason I say that is from the farmer comes the produce for the agro processor. So there is a domino effect. If you support the farmer, then there is more supply available for someone in entrepreneurship to then convert that produce into something else. I recall that when we had our trade mission with the Trinidadian Manufacturers Association, Trinidad and Tobago to be correct, they were surprised and they were so excited to see how many fruits were available in Dominica. And it seems that in their economy, agro-processing is a very big aspect of the economy and contributing to the GDP. So we definitely need to strengthen our farmers in Dominica and provide them with the support so that they can provide the additional supply that is needed to provide consistency with what the agro-processors can bring forward. Definitely, we support the continued investment in education, because even outside of the Dominica State College, mention was made of the Youth Business Trust, and we know that several times throughout the year they provide this entrepreneurship development program for several entrepreneurs. So it's good. What we believe can be tweaked is maybe seeing how we can establish KPIs, because with any policy that you put into place coming from a private sector perspective, the key thing is really monitoring what the outcome was of it. So we will be working with the public-private sector committee, and I believe that we need to establish these KPIs so these numbers can be reported to the public. How many new MSMEs were registered within the year? How many of them have actually grown? How many of them have increased employment numbers and so forth? And all of that will help to see whether or not the policies are actually working. I mean, I could say a lot more, but we have some other people to speak. But definitely, I am in big support of the MSME sector, because that has been seen regionally, internationally as a driving factor of growth in any economy.
Right. Brenton, you took the words out of my mouth as it relates to the private sector's contribution to growth and development within any economy. But for me, as a youth bias advocate, I was particularly impressed with the policies that were specifically targeting granting greater access to youth as it relates to agriculture. The policy that specifically mentioned leasing land for $1 per year per acre. It really stood out to me because obviously for many youth, they may not have access to financing, they may not have access to capital, and having that specific opportunity to access land at such a very inexpensive rate obviously will better align with our strategy of that $700 million contribution of agriculture to GDP by 2030. So I was particularly very impressed with that specific policy. However, from the MSME perspective, we recognize that formalization is a very key challenge that we experience. And so, as you mentioned, there are farmers, and Aisha mentioned this as well, there are farmers who farm, and they are registered, and then there are those who are just, going day by day doing their farming. And so I think this poses an opportunity to as well couple this with a drive for formalization across not just agriculture, but as well within the MSME sector, because all of these policies that they are the government has announced, they obviously they come for companies being formalized. So I believe that there needs to be greater efforts as well with regards to ensuring that we can see greater formalization, because that can definitely contribute to tax revenue collection from an aggregate perspective. I really appreciated the rebate program for the agriculture sector as well. I wish we had seen something similar for the MSME sector. But definitely, again, for it, I see greater diversification happening across agriculture, aquaculture, poultry farmers, and I think these two were the ones that stood out to me the most as it relates to agriculture. From an MSME perspective, one of the key challenges that many of our members and even individuals operating within the private sector have iterated is that costs of doing business remains a critical challenge for them. And the government announced the completion date expected for the geothermal power plant, and with the transmission network currently underway, we anticipate that by the end of December or by the start of January 2026, that we will be transitioning to renewable energy. And I mean, one of the things I really want to advocate for the MSME sector is really, while it's iterated that there's going to be public awareness and public education surrounding geothermal energy, we really want to understand what the cost implications are going to be for the private sector. We know that obviously costs are going to decrease, but it would be great within the public scope of awareness and education to really do greater research and share that information with the private sector in regards to what those cost implications are going to be. Are they going to see reductions of 10%, 20%, so that there's greater buy-in across the private sector and as well across households? And Aisha mentioned this already. I mean, we know that cost of living is it's not unique to us. It's not something that is only being experienced in Dominica. It's a global challenge and concern. And the extension of the removal of VAT across many of the basic commodities will definitely see an increase in disposable income, or I should say, for real income for many of our households. And so that is welcomed and appreciated. And I look forward to the minimum wage review and board. From a private sector perspective, obviously, we understand the repercussions of increasing minimum wage, but definitely this is definitely an issue that needs to be discussed. And so I am very grateful that this was announced. I am more grateful for the fact that it will be realized soon, and looking forward to whatever contributions that we at the Chamber as well can make in regards to that review board.
Thank you. Well, I want to remain at the macro level, because something is happening in the macro space that we do not pay attention to, in that we have a number of very large projects and very significant projects that are ongoing and gradually being completed and put into operation. So we have been working at a transformation of this economy. So I'm happy that this budget was able to put together, to package it in such a way that brings it into focus as a major platform for transformation and growth. Because we have a situation where we are very dependent on traditional sectors that are very vulnerable to quite a few variables, especially climate change. And we have suffered tremendously from the hurricanes and storms and troughs and so on. And we are trying to build a more resilient country, a more resilient economy. And those are going to help us. And these projects, they have the potential, if properly implemented, properly managed, they have the potential to springboard, to help the country to take off in a new direction. And so that's important. And it is important that we understand that we have not been able to do it in manufacturing, right? Although we have a very dynamic agro-processing sector, but large-scale manufacturing usually does it, or it did it for the larger countries, the developed countries. But our approach is quite good, because we are not depending on a single sector, we are depending on a number of sectors to achieve that transformation. And one of those that we're dependent on is tourism, the tourism sector. And I want to explain what is happening in tourism that is transformational. Not many people understand it, but the government is now focusing on the larger hotels now, and building not one but many at the same time. So you can see it's like the model is like a mushroom. You have at the bottom the boutique type small hotels. You've made them very attractive and very efficient. You can say that you've laid the foundation for the larger ones. You've built the reputation, and you're now building larger ones that you hope that can benefit from what you've done at the lower level with the boutique type small hotels. So it's a scaling up. It's an advancing of the tourism sector, both horizontally and also vertically. We have to understand that. That is very important to understand. That is not just building one hotel in Picard, one hotel. It's a strategy. It's a strategy to upgrade the sector, to transform the sector, to scale up the sector, the tourism sector. And this is supplemented by the airport, international airport, importantly, because for this Creole Music Festival, people are unable to get suitable space to live. I'm hearing so many things. Yeah, a lot. I don't know what we're going to do, but it's really critical. So we are responding to demand, and all the demand now, but also future demand, like what the airport is going to bring. So I think in the tourism sector, it clearly responds to the macro development needs of the country. The need for better growth, revenue, employment, higher level employment, because we seem to we're providing quite a bit of employment in construction, at the construction level. But in terms of the higher level, we need to improve a bit. And I think the hotels and the marina and the international airport will make provision, will be able to attract some of these employments. So you see the linkages that are being created between the needs at the macro and the sector level. I must say that so I'm pleased with that. I'm very pleased with that we have been able to maintain that, because that is important. We cannot have a fragmented economy. So they are linked, and I want us to understand that and to manage it very carefully, and to understand the dynamism that occurs. And then we have agriculture. As Ashma said, there are a number of incentive packages, the rebates, for example. And there is a hidden strategy in the contribution of the agricultural sector, where there's a slight larger emphasis placed on bringing in young farmers, local entrepreneurs into the agricultural sector. There's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. And it's important, very, very, very important. So our agriculture now is basically dominated by transient labor. Transient labor that sometimes becomes entrepreneurial, but also sometimes migrate, disappear from this country, and the gaps are created. Expectations are lost. All the projections that we make in terms of contributions, these are wasted away. So the strategy this year is to bring more local entrepreneurs, younger people into the sector by providing incentives to grow things. And I hope we can make adequate provision for export and so on. DEXA has been strengthened. So these are things that impress me, because I know these are important. I have been in this space for a while, 25 years, doing budgets and so on, and trying to understand how the economy works and trying to improve it. So for me, these are very important, and I'm very pleased that we're able to. They were maintained. Those concerns were captured and maintained in the budget address.
Okay. As we move along, I would like us to focus now on some of the enabling environment that allows some of these budget measures that you have mentioned to take root. I want you to, as a group, to spontaneously raise to us some of the things that you think would be helpful in the implementation of those budget measures. Let's start with you, Magdoga.
Okay. Interestingly, I think I hinted to that before. I mean, as it relates to the entrepreneurial ecosystem, there needs to be greater focus on formalization. For many of the different policies that are being pitched, I mean, we recognize that the entrepreneurs who will mostly benefit are those who are registered. And so there needs to be a formalization drive, and I think there needs to be greater effort, collaboration between the Chamber, as well as SIPO, NDFD, DYBT, these organizations, even the MSME units that have been recently introduced at the National Bank of Dominica and as well the Republic Bank. And I believe, this in itself will not only make companies more ready to receive these benefits, but as well, when we look at, export market ready and and standards, the formalization and as well supply side policies looking at training and capacity building can definitely benefit from that as well. And so I think this is one key focus area that we should be looking at. We are currently actually conducting our second quarterly business performance survey. From the first quarterly business performance survey, what we recognize is that many of the organizations are not registered, and they are not registered for a number of reasons. Information failure. Some organizations register once and they never go back to register again. So I think there needs to be greater drive in regards to ensuring that entrepreneurs and small business owners are aware of the formalization process, because when it comes to actually benefiting from these grants, benefiting from the different policies, the rebate programs, these things that are being implemented, they're not necessarily eligible to qualify to receive these benefits. So I think it's necessary to ensure that prior to those being realized and implemented, there should be stronger efforts with regards to seeing that more of our entrepreneurs and small business owners can, become formalized.
Ms. Ferrara, you're part of an association. Can you tell us how does association feature in that formalization process and the benefits that can be derived from this budget in terms of individuals grouping together, creating clusters or associations?
Okay, well, as an association, you have strength in numbers. So when you collect together, people are able to pull ideas and direct them towards the avenues that need to hear. So for DHTA, for example, when it came to the contributions to this budget, we beard from where our members' thoughts on the industry, what they're struggling with, and took that into consideration. Along the lines of stretching it diversely through the economy, we have to look at, it starts from the basics. We have to go right back to the basics. Ashma mentions it, but we have to pull on the knowledge share information and knowledge so people can understand the direction that it's going. So with us, in terms of, let me use an example, we're looking at trail maintenance and forming relationships between the individuals with properties along the trails, lack of trail maintenance due to economic hindrances, and coming together to form collaborations. For instance, some of our members actually contribute to, on their own, I will note, contribute to maintaining the trails. But again, they cannot do that. So in recent times, we've reached out to the government as an organization, and they have supported us and asked for proposals. So the private sector can now contribute towards the development of the trail in line with the government. So these are part of the measures that can be taken in an organization and bringing people together. One thing I'd like to see, though, Mr. Mr. Correct mentioned education and stimulating growth within the educational. Lost my train of thought. No, not the sector, but stimulating the knowledge, passing on knowledge from the youth, and helping them contribute to the development of any sector, not just one sector. And for us, again, as organizations, I have to say, we haven't got to forget that Dominica is like an organization. And if we do not help each other to benefit, then we will go nowhere. So I am happy to hear that there are advancements in agriculture. I'm happy to hear that the public servants will get some kind of incentives to be able to own and afford their own homes. I'm happy to hear that there is going to be decreases in taxes in foodstuffs coming in. All these things do contribute to better mindsets, and when we have a better mindset, people then see more, they understand more, they don't feel as stressed. Now I bring that a little closer to tourism. I'm sitting here and looking at the 2.2% that the budget of our entire budget this coming year is 2.2% for tourism. 2.2%, yes, we're invested in the infrastructure, but if we only have 2.2% of the budget now on heavily invested infrastructure, we need to look at increasing that greater over the next 3 to 5 years, because we have to encourage marketing, because the only way we're going to get people to come here to use the things that we are investing heavily in, we have to get them to understand, hey, we exist. So the HTA does form part of helping the other organizations and the government to understand that you need to push with DDA. You need to push when you go outside. You need to do it from the small business sector. A lot of the members are micro, one person doing something, but they contribute greatly. Because if they didn't exist, people will not have places to stay. They won't have cars to rent. They won't have taxis to go on. There will be no foundation to the tourism economy, which by far actually contributes. Contributes largely to the overall budget. Sorry, the number has escaped me now.
In terms of GDP?
GDP,
35%.
Exactly, 35%. Yeah. So when you get 2.2% of the budget, it's hard. It's hard to stomach that. But I will sit here and hope that what is implemented in this year's budget, which I think is great because we're looking at the linkage forming part of it, will then avalanche down in the next year and the year to follow, so that we are all ready when it comes to the larger market coming in. But I must note that we're looking at low impact, high yield. So again, I look at the cruise tourism. We're looking at going towards increasing our cruise tourism numbers, but they affect our environment, and we have to bear that in mind. So we would like to look at low impact, high yield. So that's another takeaway that you heard the minister mention it, and I hope that in months to come and in the further consultations that will take place, that we will strengthen that along the way.
Yes, in terms of performance, Brenton, you mentioned earlier on that there should be some KPIs. What sort of framework that you are contemplating, and what recommendations you would make towards that effect?
That boils down to, I believe, a more formalized public-private sector working committee. In the last budget, it was announced that this committee was established, and we have since held a few meetings and we have discussed different points. But with this budget, and going back to what Carrot spoke about, and I think it really emphasizes the point that this budget really touches on so many different facets of Dominica. It in itself, in my opinion, is a difficult one to manage, and I don't think the government can do it on their own. We in the private sector have our part to play in supporting it and also helping to execute it and monitor it, and that's where the public-private sector committee comes to play in my mind. We need to definitely meet more often, have a standing maybe monthly meeting and ad hoc meetings when necessary. And I'm even thinking that at some point we need to establish subcommittees where you have the overarching committee and then you have different subcommittees looking at specific aspects of the economy or the different sectors feeding back into the overarching committee. And through that process, we have to look at how effectively these initiatives are working. I think, in my opinion, speaking on an annual basis in terms of budget is not sufficient. We need to have quarterly assessments to see what is working, what is not working. And sometimes it requires just a simple tweak to an initiative in order to make it really bear the fruits that you're looking forward to. So it is something that is doable, in my opinion. It's just a matter of putting the structure into play. But we within the private sector, we are willing to provide that support. We definitely need to be able to reference KPIs because at the end of the day, those KPIs will guide us as to what has really worked, what needs to be tweaked. For example, yes, there are grant setups, and I've heard in speaking with different players in the MSME market, they are grateful for the grants, but some of them speak to the process they have to go through to access the grant. So sometimes the period of applying to the period of receiving it is a bit lengthy. So things like that, the public-private sector committee definitely needs to look at how can we streamline the process more, how can we make it simpler, how can we make the information more accessible. And once we have that ongoing, then I believe we will really see the budget doing what it is intended to do. It's a lot of work. I mean, that's why I said earlier, I could only speak to a few things because if I have to speak to everything, it might take the entire conversation. So it's a very ambitious budget, but definitely through teamwork, I believe it can be accomplished.
Aisha, could you share with us, as a person involved in private sector development within the public sector, some of the key aspects you think could aid in some of the things that Brenton, Aisha, and McDougall mentioned earlier on?
Well, from a person who has been in the public service for the past 5 years, what I have seen and what I've observed, because I actually have a passion for it, is what impedes implementation, first of all, is information. If the information is not in the public eye, then no one is going to know what they can actually benefit from the budget. 2, after the information is there must be some form of education. So that's where it comes to when Ashma and Brendan were both speaking about actually having the process, streamlined. Hey, I'm a farmer. This is what I need to do to become a registered farmer. And it actually comes from the ministerial level as to when an individual comes to the ministry, you have to understand how do you deal with that individual. Because there are different persons with different capacities in our society. And if you make something difficult for someone and already their mindset towards it, is like, what, I'm already doing my business, I'm already being successful. It's going to impact us, one, not only in implementation, but 2, when you need the necessary data to ensure how the farming sector is being done, you may not even be able to capture that farmer or a few farmers simply because of, how the approach to the farmer is. So 1, you have to know that, great, this is what you need to do to become a farmer. This is how I'm going to assist you. This is how I'm going to make the process seamless and easy. So, hey, you need to benefit from the rebates. We all know the inputs into hydroponics and aquaponics is quite expensive. We need to know when it is being drafted as to how does the individual benefit. It is explained to them. Again, to education and information. This is critical to allow the budget to work. Because if people do not know about it, they do not even know how to begin to participate. So there needs to be a way of information by, from the DEICs, from the other private sector. So that's why I believe it is critical that, when even the managers of the different financial institutions are even invited to the budget, they themselves can actually go out there and create and curate different products and services from their financial institutions to benefit their members, because this is what the budget creates for them. So it has to be something that is, not just simply taken from, from the public sector aspect, meaning the government, but the private sector too has a key role to play. They too need to understand what is the budget and how they themselves can create avenues for their members to access the budget.
I'd like to challenge Sam for a moment. Sam, you mentioned earlier on you got been 25 years across involved in the process. I know that the budget refers to the capital expenditure called the Public Sector Investment Program. It has been monitored through the Ministry of Planning, Economic Development now. What recommendations in this current cycle of budget would you make in terms of our approach that would take into consideration some of the ideas that have been mentioned by the other panelists?
So the issue of implementation and implementation impediments were, it was mentioned, many of those were mentioned. This is correct because we have had some very ambitious public sector investment programs, I'm telling you. And 12 months is pretty short. And in terms of capacity, we do have some capacity challenges in the public service. So the first thing I want to say is that when government commits to providing support, you see some of the support that we provide to farmers, and there is a partnership. We would like the beneficiaries to take that partnership seriously. Don't think that because it's government, it's free money, we can enjoy it, we can have a few drinks and have a party, and no. If you are given a certain amount of money to invest, you should see it as an investment. And you should work to ensure that you are accountable. You should work to ensure that you're able to set aside somewhere that 5,000 by producing and selling and marketing and so on. So you make your business viable. I think we just take this thing for granted, that because it's money coming from government, and I don't like people to call it free money. It's not free money. No such thing. So forget it, right? Sometimes government has, sometimes, the kind of sacrifices that one has to make to find this money to provide to the productive sectors and the actors in the productive sectors. It's a huge sacrifice. So that money, you invest it, you work hard at ensuring that the enterprise becomes viable. And you set aside that in a way that if you can even pay it back, you can say, oh boy, maybe that person needs it more than me. I made quite a bit of money. I've heard people say that. I made quite a bit of money, I remember when we were doing country poverty assessment and we went out to some of the communities, people told us they make quite a bit of money in banners and all that money saved up, but it was a subsidized sector, It was a subsidized sector, so a lot of other people's money went into it. But the issue of reinvestment and the issue of appreciation and seriousness, changing the mindset. Nothing is free. Changing the mindset, man. So making, the fisheries industry, for example, has benefited tremendously from government support. And the fish is still very expensive. Yes, I agree. We buy fish at $12, $10. But the thing is now, where does that money go? Is there reinvestments? Is it in circulation? All these, as one, I think is Aisha who said, information. We need to take some of this information down to the general public. And for the larger projects in the PSIP, when you're given a contract, I see people waste time on contract. They have delays and they drag the contract. Some of those things are not, it's not being honest at all, because we are a tropical country. You could have weather changes and weather patterns that are unexpected, and all those things can influence and interfere with implementation. We have had a lot of those. You throw up your projects into overrun, overdraft over thing. You spend more money then, and I think people don't take those things seriously. People don't take those things seriously at all. So I would like to see where an effort is made to implement although there was a reduction to try to manage the expectation and also try to manage the implementation challenges, reduction in the PSIP. But the implementation is still a challenge. Some of us who do the administrative work cannot do the construction, cannot do the technical work. We have to depend on others, contractors, other ministries to assist. So the thing is, we have certain expectations, we have certain projections that are made. These projections we all must understand that these projections are also very important to help us understand what growth, how the economy is going to perform, what are likely to be some of the outcomes for this year and coming years. It is something that we have to be monitoring and working on consistently. And so when you are given a project to implement, take it very seriously. There are timelines in the project. Adhere to timelines. There are costing in the project. Adhere to some of the costings, all of the costings. We have to take things much more seriously if we are going to achieve the transformation that we are aiming for. And sometimes I think it is very close to us. It's at hand, but either there is a hurricane, I remember in June 2016, we had reached a stage where even with little efforts, we had reached growth of 3.5, and we were saying, whoa, I think we've got it now. We've got it. And then here came Maria and blew it away, man. So we have to factor all these uncertainties into the public sector investment program, because that's where some of the major drivers of development and growth are. And actually, we depend on them. And we have certain projections that are actually invested in them. And so if they can be implemented properly, that makes everybody happy, because we have higher growth, we have employment being created, we have the achievement of our fiscal balances, and so forth and so forth and so forth. So the management of the PSIP is very important, and that is reflected in the way we implement some of the projects. The projects are implemented by private sector contractors, sometimes managed by the various ministries. The entire hierarchy should take the process of implementation very seriously, because there is a cost to waste. And we do have some wastage in terms of implementation. We have an implementation deficit, by the way. It's not only Dominica's problem, but it's a regional problem where you do not implement all what you intend to implement, either because of capacity. Mainly ours is mainly because of capacity issues. We are not able to implement all the things that we want to do. We are very ambitious people, and we plan well. Incidentally, we do plan well, and we have one of the best planning framework in the region. Some people say the world, not me. We do not say that, but other people say that. But we have tried over the years to put in place a development planning framework for Dominica that is envied by a lot of people. You know that, right? So we use that to prepare both the both the budget on both segments of the budget, the recurrent and as well as the capital. And so at the top, we try to ensure that we have a good framework, and the budget is influenced by that framework. And part of that budget is the capital section. And that's where we depend on a lot of people to get it right. We have a lot of control on the recurrent, a lot. But on the capital, sometimes the capital is in the field most of the time. So yes, it can be a challenge for us.
Thank you. At this stage, we have done an hour, and I want us to shift gear. I need to get some personal views and some personal intake into the whole budget, and I'm going to, just ask you to spontaneously lead us on. I'm going to start with Ms. McDougall. As we go into there, you may choose. All right, tell us. What's your view on the budget, and what do you think we could do better? Or what would you advise, knowing that the actual budget process is going on in Parliament right now, and definitely some of our inputs can have some impact on the final outcome?
Okay. I think we started off the discussion as a precursor when we came into the room earlier. For me, looking at the budget from an objective lens, there is a bit of everything for every sector in the budget. Like, really, there was an effort to place a mechanism for agriculture, tourism, MSME, like public sector, everywhere. There are allocations everywhere for everyone. And I feel that there's also challenges in doing something like this, in this approach. I'll take it a step back. A couple of years ago, within the National Youth Council, when we actually hosted the National Youth Parliament, one of the questions that we debated was, should the government take an approach to financing two sectors versus financing all? Right? That was one of the questions that we actually debated at the national level, and literally we're seeing it come. It's literally coming to life, to fruition within this budget. I mean, I used an analogy earlier where, how can we measure impact? For example, if we have 5 farmers receiving $1 million, right, versus having 100,000 farmers benefiting from that same allocation, and measuring what the impact would be from an aggregate perspective, if we would actually have greater success giving fewer more than giving more less. I think that's, for me, one of the key things I'm seeing from this budget. While I appreciate having, allocations for everyone benefiting in some way, I see that there could be greater value in placing emphasis in areas where there might be greater impact. So, for example, within agriculture, we know obviously this specifically is a key sector that we definitely want to see great benefits realized from. I mean, in Dominica, we know that we are blessed with very fruitful land. And so looking at many of the policies that were implemented, I envision and I hope that when they are actually being implemented, that there might be greater focus on potentially farmers who may be more ready, farmers who may be able to experience greater benefits. And by that, what I mean is, I want to be very diplomatic with what I say. By that, what I mean is, if we have 20 farmers who are ready for $1 million investment versus 500 farmers who may be, just benefiting to say that they are benefiting, I think we should choose the first and not the latter. I think that there might be greater benefit realized from a national perspective, from a macro perspective, if we're investing in fewer farmers on a larger scale, right? There'll be greater benefits in regards to the amount of agricultural produce that comes from that, in regards to export, in regards to employment. So looking at the spillover effects by sector from investing large in a few, definitely I think would have greater impact than investing a little in many. I want to piggyback off of a first comment that was made by Brenton in regards to the monitoring and evaluation. With many of the policies that are being proposed, it is necessary to ensure that we have monitoring and evaluation of those policies prior to the 12-month mark. And by that, what I mean is, for example, last year we would have met in regards to the SSB tax that was implemented, right? So we know that obviously we're experiencing a health crisis as relates to NCDs, and you know that SSB tax was a great incentive that was placed, but the idea behind the incentive is to ensure that we were mitigating the consumption of sugary beverages. And the question is, was that really met over the last year, right? And if it wasn't, but we had higher tax revenues collected, how are we actually allocating those tax revenues? Are we increasing education surrounding the impacts of sugar-sweetened beverages? Are we going in schools and creating alternatives with that funding? So application of that into this new budget is ensuring that we have more monitoring and evaluation happen, and not happen 12 months post, but happen probably like midterm. So, you know, by January, are we meeting with, you know, the same individuals who contributed within the pre-budget consultations to discuss how these potential policies have been impacting the relative sectors, the specific sectors that they've been meant to target. So I think that is completely necessary to ensure that we have, in my own opinion, effective policy. I am an advocate for data. I believe that you cannot make a decision, you cannot make an informed decision if you do not have information, right? And so whereas we are saying that we want to inform the public of things, I believe that the decisions that we are making have to be informed by information. And so for sure, there should be a drive in collecting more information, especially with many of the policies that are being potentially pitched as it relates to, for example, minimum wage, right? Do we have information relative to labor participation rates by gender, by age, by community, or population census? I mean, all of this, these are important documents that can guide the decisions that we make. And so without these bits of information, really, are we being genuinely, correctly informed to make appropriate decisions that can drive growth and development? So these are some of the things that really struck me. I mean, I want to make mention to the housing policy that was implemented, because from the Chamber's perspective, we actually, within the pre-budget consultation, had proposed an idle house land tax, very controversial. We are there for the controversy. For young people, young persons are looking to purchase houses. They're looking to purchase affordable homes, affordable land. And this has been a challenge. You know, I was just saying earlier as well, just driving through Goodwill, for example, there are many abandoned properties. And, you know, there are disputes for amongst family members for such. And there is a policy within the budget that speaks to that, right? However, I think there needs to be greater incorporation and implementation across different areas where, you know, disputes may come from. It may not just be for family. It may be that, you know, somebody just wants to hold on to the property. And we have the issue where land taxes may not necessarily be paid on that property for a number of years. And so I think there should be reconsideration or consideration to include, in addition to the disputes, some kind of tax that can be implemented in that regard to incentivize individuals either to sell if they cannot afford to upkeep the property, or potentially it might induce them to actually want to rehabilitate that particular area, consider investment along those lines. So, I mean, I'll come back to speaking on this particular policy because honestly, it's very dear to me. I have many friends who have been house hunting for a number of months now, and it's so difficult because you see the properties, they're there, they're abandoned, and there are just no efforts that are being made to have them available for persons who have that interest to buy or to lease.
Thank you. Brenton?
I believe it's a positive budget. I will say that, in my opinion, it is building for the future. Based on the items in it, it's really about laying the foundations that we can start building up off of for the benefit of the country in the long run. Some of these initiatives are not going to have immediate impacts on the economy, but if it is actually implemented, I can definitely see the benefits that it will have in Dominica in the future. Just to speak on some different aspects, we heard from Carrot about the tourism strategy and the construction of so many hotels across the island, and I believe that definitely is a move in the right direction. Some people might say it's early, but if we are thinking of really benefiting from the international airport when it comes into play, we need to have the room capacity available, because I recall I have a friend in St. Vincent, and one of the challenges that they had was when they had the international airport, they did not have room for people. So it took them about 3 years to really get the benefit of the influx of people. And we definitely, I guess, have learned from that experience, and we are preparing ourselves so that once the airport is there, then the movement will be able to be accommodated. And just the fact of establishing the relationships with the airlines right now is a very important factor in that. With the flights to Miami, I've heard about New York hopefully coming on board. I would love to go on that one. All of this is important because you want to have that relationship in place so that by the time the airport is ready, it's really about just a transfer of location. So I can see that there are strategies in play to sort of prepare us for the future. But while on the whole aspect of tourism and all these different properties coming up, we have to look at it from the other aspect of the surrounding environment. And it's a call to us within government and within the private sector, even within the communities. We have to start thinking of developing an environment that will encourage people to come to our communities, because it shouldn't be a situation of having a hotel there in isolation. The nature of a lot of tourists right now is that, yes, they will come to the hotel, but at some point they will want to venture outside to explore the local cuisines, the local bars. So we have to start developing our people to a state of mind where they see these opportunities and they start laying down the foundations for these opportunities. Even where the airport is coming up, some persons need to start thinking of building Airbnbs and restaurants and bars up there. And not even for after the airport comes into play, but before, because during construction, you're going to have a lot of manpower station up there, and these people need entertainment. It's the opportunity to capture that within your circle. So we as a people need to start paying attention to the budget and sort of the strategy and look for the opportunity in the budget. I always tell people that with any economy you go in, you will have a challenge. No economy is perfect. Even the great America has its challenges right now. But yes, the great America. But our responsibility as citizens and the private sector is to look for the opportunity that exists despite and in spite of the challenges in our communities, because companies still thrive despite all the things that happen. During COVID, we had businesses pivoting to digital. So it was no longer brick and mortar, but it was having online websites and e-commerce. So what are the opportunities that exist and are going to exist for us in the future with all these capital projects going on? Even as they go on, it presents opportunities for us within the communities and private sector. So with all these capital projects, Do they need health insurance if you're in insurance? Do they need a bar set up in their local area? Do they need a place where they can sleep overnight? So there are several opportunities that exist. And it's often said that when you have so much capital projects happening at the same time, there is going to be a domino effect in the economy where you can make use of all the activity happening, because you have to buy construction materials. The company that buys the construction material hires people. The people they hire maybe can get a bonus at some point depending on extra activity. They spend it in the economy. So it has that sort of domino impact. And we have to start seeing the economy like that. Now, as I said earlier, the challenge sometimes is these things are happening now, but we focus on it now without realizing the future. So we always have to position ourselves to be mindful of that. Yeah, in the context of building for the future, we did not speak about it much today, but a lot was mentioned about education. And within the private sector, there has been the outcry and the challenge of the labor coming out of the Dominica State College not being 100% ready for employment. No, it's not. I was told don't blast us. No, it's not. I wouldn't say it's a matter of blasting, but it's just a reality that things are changing in the world. And as things change, we have to recognize that we have to review processes that have been in existence for some time. And part of that review process is looking at the curriculum. Is the curriculum fit for the current working environment? For example, sometimes we place a lot of emphasis on education and how many ones you got and so forth. And so forth and so forth. But at the end of the day, what some companies look for is whether this person can function in a team. Because at the end of the day, if you have the right attitude, the right soft skills, you can learn the technicalities necessary to do the job. So we have to bear that in mind. So I was happy to hear mention of the fact that the curriculum is being reviewed. We're starting at the younger stages with a view for the higher levels at some point, and also at present looking at the curriculum at the Dominica State College. And I would like to implore that we implement financial literacy in our school programs at some point in the near future, because it is, I think, a phenomena that is affecting a lot of young persons where they are not financially ready for the real world. You jump out there, you do not know how to save, you do not know about loans and so forth. If we can give them that education, how to file your taxes, if we can give them that education, it better prepares them. And I think the world has started to realize that slowly, where in Miami they have the financial literacy, the financial literacy bill, where you must pass the course to graduate. I think New York is looking at it right now, and also Belize is also looking to implement financial literacy in school. So in light of the fact that we are looking at our curriculum, we should definitely consider having that attached to it as well. In terms of agriculture, we spoke about that earlier. I'm happy with the investments, and once again, I believe it's building towards the future. Tourism, definitely a significant contributor to Dominica, and the fact about tourism is that it's not isolated in the sense of you live tourism in your own space, because the more people who come to Dominica, the more people that actually spend in our economy, so the private sector benefits by extension through the increased traffic. I'm happy to have heard that there has been an increase in the number of stayovers and also the cruise ship arrivals. And that speaks to the fact that we have a big opportunity here. But the question is, how do we continue to build upon the opportunity? And I heard earlier, which is a good point, definitely marketing is a factor, but the overall structure, the service, the feeling that they get in Dominica has to be considered too. And it goes back to what I mentioned earlier about the hotels. The hotel is one aspect, but you have to look at the entire value chain. Because when they come in and they see a dirty city, unfortunately, it happens a few times, that affects the quality that they experience in Dominica. The service that they receive from the various hotels or the restaurants or the bars that they go to, that affects the experience. So the whole aspect of education, it might be looked at in isolation, has an impact in all of that. So we have to look at that entire value chain, the entire structure, where when people come in, from the time they land in Dominica to the time they leave, everything that they interacted with and the point where they had some kind of connection or moment of truth, it was a positive one. And I think the budget sort of touches on all of these facets in its little pieces. And to sum it up, I mean, Ashman made a very important point, and it's something that in the private sector we say sometimes. I go through strategic planning with my company every year. It's an annual process for us. And they always ask us to come up with different things that you would like to do in the new year to achieve your goals. And then they have this caveat. They always say, don't give us 10 things, just give us 3. If you have 10, cut it down to 3 and focus on those 3, because those are the 3 things that you will actually accomplish. And just in nature of planning, your planning system can be excellent, but just the nature of human beings, if we have too many things on that to-do list, it sometimes defeats the purpose where you actually accomplish none. So it is an ambitious budget. That's why I mentioned earlier that I don't think it's something that the government can do on its own. The government definitely needs to partner with us in the private sector, whether it's through the DIC, through DHC, or any other organization. But they need to rope in everyone who has a part to play in this budget, whether they will benefit, whether their thoughts or ideas should be considered, to be actively engaged in it. Because I really believe that if we can accomplish everything that is listed in this budget, it is going to put us in a very good position going forward in terms of foundation, and then we will just have to continue to build upon it from there. So I like it. I believe it's doable, but it's doable through teamwork and collaboration, not in isolation.
Thank you. Ms. Ferreira?
Okay, thank you, Brenton, because you've mentioned a lot of examples that I was going to touch on. So in summary, really, the budget is, I see the budget as a good start for a long-term future. Yeah. That's how I see it. So for me, it's creating linkages among the sectors for future growth and to encourage generational wealth development. But that can only happen through the implementation of what has been stated in the budget, and for us as a nation, the accountability aspect of it. So when we have to understand, so Aisha, talking about the education, the information, awareness. Awareness is so key. You cannot have a budget deliberated for a couple days and then have a team set up and nobody is aware of it. Nobody knows who's coming out. We do a little bit public service announcements, 2, 3, and then it's just put on the back burner and it's left alone. That cannot happen because it will go on year and year. So let's say we have this magnificent budget this year that is touching on every sector and laying that foundation for growth. But if we do not put in the effort this year, throughout the entire 12 months, we cannot follow through for the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. And I see that budget as a foundation for a longer term future, incorporating the different sectors and to create linkages among them. So we need to implement it, and Dominicans need to be accountable through our own private and personal self, the organizations that are there, like the HTA, the AIC, and also within the public service. Within the public service, when we think about awareness, we should not only think about the private sector and population, but the public service has to do their part. So please, I hope that's not forgotten. And Mr. Carrett, you mentioned investments and people understanding investment. Investment education is very, 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 very important. It's important because people don't understand what investments are. So use the examples of the farmers. Yes, the farmers get something and they think it's free money, but they don't understand that that money needs to be carefully calculated, understood, reinvested, look at how it's going to affect the growth and of their business. But they see it as money that's being given now and don't understand that they should be creating more opportunity for themselves. And in creating opportunities, for yourself, you can create more opportunities for your community. So you have community growth and by extension proper growth for the nation on a whole. So we look at education investments, then we have the benefits on how to bring about advancement in each other and the opportunities for future growth again. I am one that looks at long-term planning. I believe that you lay foundations, You have your short-term views, you have your medium-term, and then you have the review again, so you have long-term benefits. We have data collection. The data collection, I've heard about data collection for ever so long, and it will be very disappointing that we put over the last, I think, 2 years, I've seen the opportunity for more data collection happen. There have been consultation groups coming on, gathering data. We have attended, I think among ourselves, we have attended so many of these, these forums. And if all the data that is being collected, we need to use it properly and create, again, long-term opportunities. Assess it, analyze it, give people jobs, because you cannot just give them jobs to collect the data. Give them jobs to assess it and implement, create strategies for implementation. And then we have the private-public sector collaboration committee, which we are part of, and we're hoping that with that we can bring on a greater scope of looking at the smaller things that are sometimes overlooked. And when we have organizations coming together with this, I'm hoping that we can look at the smaller things, contribute to it from a public sector and the private sector, and have a better understanding from both sides, better communication, better collaboration, and come to effective and positive decisions for better Dominica in, again, 3, 5, 10, 15, and 25 years.
Aisha?
Well, I'm definitely going to be short because they've already said everything. But I believe the budget is one that has taken on a holistic approach. So it touches the individual who simply exists in the household, who will basically benefit from a reduction in their grocery bill. It has taken sectors into consideration, and as much as I understand the thought of Ashma as to if we'll maybe look at 3 sectors at a time, then we might actually see more productivity. But on the same coin, I can actually say that if certain sectors are left unattended to, even for a 12-month period, the gap that exists in a sector may actually widen. So therefore, again, it goes back to implementation. It goes back to individuals playing their part. It goes back to the information and the education. What's in the budget for me? How can I actively participate in the implementation of this budget? We're not speaking about, the large capital projects, but the simple things, from the agriculture, from the tourism, again, to when Brendan spoke about, the communities surrounding these hotels, how me as an individual can actually take ownership. So in changing the mindsets of people to take ownership of their communities, to understand that they actually have to actively participate in making things be realized, from even owning the small bar. How can I go to the DIC to find out the necessary information as to how can I start that small business? How can I actually contribute to the entertainment sector? How can I actually keep my surroundings clean? These basic things that the individuals have to learn to take ownership. So again, too, like everybody has already echoed, it is a really good budget. But again, for everything to actually realize, we need the information to be out there, and we need the public to be aware. We need the education as to how do I access it, and the collaboration needs to be there.
Sam,
Yep.
I'm going to introduce a little shift in discussion here. I observe that we have a budget of securities. I heard job security, I heard food security, financial literacy, crime. We talk about inflation. I want you to speak to those issues and, draw the other panelists so that they can discuss some of the bread and butter issues that surfaced within the budget over the last day.
So the issue of security is linked to resilience. Remember, we are building the first climate resilient nation in the world. We need food security to be able to be resilient and to boast and to claim a resilient nation. We need food security. And I think by and large, when I look at the market, when I go to the market and I look at the market, as Ashma said, we need to start thinking about probably scaling up. And scaling up will require a different approach, not the food security approach completely, but also a level of export-oriented in agriculture, for example. So food security, we're talking about personal security. Yesterday I was driving on the road and a guy knocked my vehicle, pow, pow, without any reason. So we have to be able to walk and live in our society secured, feeling secured and happy. Yeah, that is very, very important. And we have to be able to live at our homes and feel secure without anybody walking through our doors or breaking our windows. Those sort of things. So there is the emphasis on security of income, for example, job security, because that contributes to the well-being of people. If you are not sure, you're uncertain about certain things in life, you get stressed up, and stress produces quite a few illnesses that we can do without. So the issue of security is very, very important. We're building a platform of resilience, and so therefore we want to ensure that our people are secure in all ways, and they can have a better quality of life, and feel safe in Dominica, and feel safe in their jobs, so they won't have to migrate. And some are doing very well, others are not doing very well, and so forth and so forth. They won't have to leave their children and migrate and leave them behind to be cared for by others. And they won't have to, of course, migrate. We have a situation where many of the children are cared for by their grandparents, and also the grandparents have no one to care for them. So there is an issue of security. The worst one we face is personal security in terms of where we go, what we do, who we link up with, and so on. For the past 2 weeks, we have had a few incidents that I think is really not warranted in our society, in this peaceful nature island state. That should be gotten rid of. We should find a way to eliminate that in our society. That doesn't belong to Dominica. So yes, we do have focus on security. The top ones, for example, food, employment security, and also the right and the liberty to walk freely without any intimidation or aggravation of self and damage of properties.
Ashma, how do we protect our environment?
This is a very key question that you're asking, and I like that you asked me this question because I really want to go back to the waste management section within the budget. I know that we have announcements were made as it relates to somewhat decentralizing waste management in Dominica. And I mean, we see it on social media. It's not necessarily a great public image for Dominica as we're marketing ourselves as a tourist destination. I like the idea of decentralization, but as well, I'm also looking at the cost implications of it. We recognize as well that there have been increased incidences as it relates to leptospirosis that were publicly announced. And so I am happy that efforts are being made to somewhat mitigate the issue of waste management. It is not just a household issue, it's also a private sector issue as well. We have, even within the DAIC, we recognize the contributions that the private sector makes as it relates to the waste management issue, specifically in the city of Roseau. I mean, we drive through Roseau and we see piles of rubbish being collected at the posts, the lamp posts at specific areas on the streets. And so I really look forward to seeing, how this approach will potentially cater to the waste management issue that we have. I appreciated the mention of potentially moving to, at some point, a waste management disposal fee. I think, however, there needs to be more aggressive move towards this, because we have been discussing this for a long time. I was lecturing at Dominica State College in 2014, since we've been discussing the issue of a waste management fee. I feel that there needs to be great research that is enacted to understand really, person's willingness and ability to pay for such. What is the appetite for? I mean, nobody wants to pay for something. I mean, people typically want things for free, but at the same time, we understand the value of living in a healthy and safe environment, right? And so I believe that there needs to be greater research that is conducted to understand, to deepen the understanding among the citizenry of Dominica in understanding whether they are willing to pay for a waste management fee, and for us to move swiftly on this within the next 12 months. So I really hope that there are great efforts that are going to be conducted in really putting a committee in place or hiring an expert to conduct a study and potentially providing a strategy and as well a recommendation as it relates to a practical disposal fee. We recognize that there are garbage collection trucks that are being donated and that have been mentioned that are expected to arrive on island within the coming months, and obviously we are going to appreciate that. But at the same time, I feel there has to be greater efforts by the public as well in regards to their waste disposal. I mean, I think even simply we have started a recycling strategy, and quite frankly, there are recycling bins in the city and people don't know how to use them. So it goes back again to the education aspect. Funny enough, I mean, when we travel, we know what to do for our trash, but it seems as if we cannot respect it in our country. So, at the same time, while we are putting in these mechanisms in place, I think as well we also need to hold people accountable, right? It provides an opportunity perhaps for employment. Perhaps we need to employ litter wardens who are working within particular communities or working, and people may not. I mean, it's controversial. I'm controversial. I'll say it. We need persons who can potentially monitor and evaluate. If there are persons who are not necessarily, dumping their trash in an ethical, in a legal way, then they should be fined because they are contributing to the waste the issue. So I appreciate the contributions and as well the mechanisms that have been put in place, but I believe that it's long overdue making a decision on implementing a waste disposal fee. I think we are past the point of implementation. We have been discussing it for a long time. There has been a lot of public conversation and dialogue across many different platforms, social media. There have been town hall meetings, radio programs. Even speaking with Mr. Mitchell, I mean, he's been in there at Dominica Solid Waste Management for a number of years, and I think this conversation has been long outstanding. I think there needs to be more aggressive action as it relates to that. And as well, greater public awareness and education, but not from a theoretical perspective, but from a more, I should say, like, hands-on perspective, telling people how to dispose of their trash versus actually, showing, having audio, having visual. Within the Dominica State College, there was a particular course that I taught, environmental economics, and within that course, I implemented, there was a case that I implemented for the students where they actually had to go at their homes and they had to measure, actually weigh how much trash they were actually consuming within their households, and how much of that could have been saved, right? And there was a lot that they were throwing in. They were not separating waste. Compost was going into just general waste with plastics. And so definitely there needs to be greater awareness, I think, when people understand the value, not just making people aware, but as well for people to understand the value of a simple thing as waste separation is important. While for some it may be more feasible because they may have a yard that they may actually be able to throw their compost in, there definitely has to be as well consideration of, well, how can we generate income from this? How can people turn this into money? And potentially, if people start seeing dollar signs, that may actually incentivize and motivate them to actually want to do it as well. Simple things that's perhaps a machine that allows people to dispose of plastic bottles and get 5 cents for every bottle that they dispose is something that could probably incentivize recycling, right? People are motivated by money. That's one of the 10 principles of economics. And so if we are incentivizing people with money, potentially for plastic recycling, plastic bottle recycling, then that could be something that could go a long way in the future. So again, appreciative of the measures that are incorporated as it relates to waste management, but definitely I think we need to be more aggressive with regards to the implementation of a waste disposal fee in the coming 12 months.
Brenton, I'm going to trigger you on the food security issue, but with a twist. There's a particular measure that is mentioned in terms of crop insurance, and leaning into your insurance experience, what can you tell us as the potential existing for crop insurance for farmers?
Yes, that is something that has been brought to us for many years ago, but unfortunately in the business that we are in, we actually do not offer crop insurance. So we can do property, we can do vehicle, we can do the individual, whether it's life, health, retirement planning, but crop is the one that has always been sort of the quote-unquote missing link. It is one that is of concern because of the fact that it is so susceptible to damage from any hurricane system or tropical storm. So I understand the cry that has been coming out from that sector, but it is one that we have not been able to address within the traditional insurance industry. And I say traditional because over some recent years there have been some new types of insurance that have been able to assist, and we call that parametric. Yes, it is a sort of new player in the market, and it is one that is really triggered based on an event or an experience rather than the loss per se. So in the event, for example, Dominica was hit with a hurricane and you had that plan set up for the eventuality of a hurricane, whether you got loss or not, you would have been able to receive a payout from that policy. So for the farmer, it helps them sort of find some kind of compensation for protection against loss in case that sort of hurricane or tropical storm manifested and it damaged the crop. It will not, in my opinion, be able to fully compensate them, but I think it is a move in the right direction where they will not necessarily be starting off from scratch, but they will have some sort of foundation that they can continue to build upon. So I think it's a good move of the government to recognize the vulnerability that exists within that industry and to look at something to put in place to assist them on top of what is outside there already. I definitely will encourage our farmers to look into it and to make use of it, because we are in a certain area in the Caribbean where we are often affected by hurricanes and tropical storms. But as I've been telling people right now, we have to stop thinking about just hurricanes and tropical storms. We have to start thinking about rain. Because if you have noticed the trend in recent months, a heavy rainfall is affecting us right now. And it is the fact that when you speak about resilience is not really just having a point where you can say, okay, we've arrived there, but it's a continuous process of evaluating what the risk your country faces and continuously putting measures in place to address it. So resilience in itself is no easy task. It's an evolving process. And as the risks start to manifest, we as a nation have to continue to look at what the solutions are going to be. You see in the budget, for example, a lot of notice was mentioned of the river walls. That is good. But the question is, the one force in life that we cannot stop is water. So if one day the rainfall is more than we anticipated and it goes above the river wall, or it finds another path, because water has a funny way of just finding some kind of avenue to divert itself to, then it's going to be a whole different discussion of, okay, after the river wall, what else do we do? So it's a continuous process of evaluating risk. It is no easy task, and I mean, I commend the government on taking up such a mandate because it is very difficult, and that is in light of everything else that has to be considered in the budget. That's why, I mean, I give my hats off to anyone who goes into politics and into government, because it's no easy task. You, within your own space as a citizen, will have a bias towards a certain direction, but then from a government perspective, they cannot just isolate policies to, one group or one individual. I understand that they have to consider as many people as possible because that's the nature of the business that they're in. So it is a tough task to balance the resilience in line with all the other initiatives in the budget to push Dominica forward. It's a balancing act that they have to undertake. But while on the topic of food, I want to touch on the health and wellness, and we heard about it in the budget. Ashma spoke to it. It's a very important part because it can cause a dent into any budget. It can prevent a government from actually implementing some of the strategies that I've listed. We have heard of the rise of the NCDs, and we must commend the government on the initiative that they supported us on some years ago, which was to encourage people to be more proactive with putting measures in place to control risk within their own circle. And I like how it was phrased earlier by Aisha, ownership. We have a right to go out there and look at the options that are available to take care of the risk within our own circles, and one of those risks being medical insurance. Because we have, I think, traditionally depended too much on the state to assist us in those emergency situations. We have to make use of the risk management tools that have been put in place through insurance companies. We know right now that through the initiative of the government some years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, right now the premiums you pay for health insurance will actually reduce your income tax, your chargeable income for income tax purposes. So it is an incentive for you to go out there and put measures in place and take ownership of your own life. And I mean, as a form of feedback, what we have seen over the years since that has been implemented is that a lot of young people have come forward to get health insurance. And it has gone a step forward where young people are insuring their parents because they are starting to understand the risk of, if you have a parent that falls sick, it falls on you as the child to take care of them. So if you're saving for maybe a vacation and your parent fell sick, no fault of yours, but that vacation trip is cancelled. And it is in the same light where the government has its budget in place to achieve certain targets. And if some people fall sick and they're not insured in the country, they're going to go to the government for help. And I don't think the government would want to say no. The government has done a very good job in supporting people, but we have to find a way to encourage people to go there and be more proactive with their own solutions. Now, as an insurance company, we cannot cover everyone. The nature of health insurance is that you have to be healthy for you to qualify for it. If you're not healthy, you won't get. So I was pleased to see in the budget that there was mention of considering national health insurance for those who are already afflicted by some kind of illness, because that is an area we definitely would not be able to get involved in, just the nature of how health insurance works. So sort of managing your risk, I think, is a good strategy we saw here, where you have the policy to encourage people to go out there and get covered, but at the same time there's an allowance for people who will not qualify for health insurance, that the state still has some kind of program in place to look after them. So it's a good strategy in my opinion. In terms of, I mean, just to end on the whole concept of the bread and butter matters of the budget, I mean, at the end of the day, they say that there are three things that we all need: food, clothing, and shelter. Regardless of who you are, where you come from, what you do in life, you must eat, you must have clothes, you must have some place to sleep. And I think the budget does a good job of touching on all those areas, because when you talk about food, you mentioned the crop insurance that helps with sustainability for farmers, and when there's sustainability for farmers, there's availability of products for us as citizens to be able to go there and buy the produce. When you think about clothing, the mention was made of the negotiations that are ongoing for some of the public sector individuals to increase their salaries, then the review of the minimum wage, some people have been saying that the wage is not high enough, which is causing the challenge to access some of these basic necessities of life. So with the implementation of that will be addressed. And then when you look at shelter, I mean, when I heard that in the budget, I was thinking to myself, boy, I need to go and work in the public sector. 2%? That's amazing. So all of that helps contribute towards, the bread and butter matters of life, food, clothing, and shelter. So going back to what we said earlier, the budget does a good job of trying to touch on so many different factors to bring up the overall quality of life in Dominica and the overall environment to increase this level of productivity, in my opinion.
So I'm going to wrap up the discussion with Kitwani and Aisha. And what I want you all to do is to make the appeal to the public. What can we say to the public as it relates to the discussions that we have had and to the budget that's been presented?
Okay, so I would firstly and foremostly ask the public to either get a copy of the budget and read it through, or listen to it through one of the recordings that have been placed via social media. As for me, sometimes I get the the electronic copy, and I play it back. I get it read to myself through read aloud. That's something that can be done. And understand areas by sector as it has been detailed out in how the budget was presented. If you have questions, there are places that you can reach out to be able to get further information. So don't just sit and think, oh, wow, I don't understand that. I might not be able to contribute in that way. You can also ask yourself positive questions. What can I do? How do I contribute? How do I act on what has been presented? How do I take part in part of the policy? How do I get information? Those are positive questions to ask yourselves. And when you ask yourselves those questions, reach out to DAIC, DHTA, the public sector. I'm sure there is an avenue that they can reach out to. Aisha might be able to tell you more about it. But do that. And then once you're informed, then you can then take steps to know where you can place yourself to act in and letting it happen. This budget can benefit us all, and it's just us to find an avenue to tap into.
Well, for me, I pretty much like to take it down to the basics. Whenever you want to achieve something in life, you have to prepare to do the walking. And to assist people in changing their mindset, nothing happens immediately. One, the public needs to be aware of that. So you have to be prepared to do the necessary work. So if you have a small business, you want to find out how do you register your small business. You take a walk up to small business, which is located on the third floor of the government headquarters. Sometimes things may not happen instantly. You have certain documents you have to present. You have to have patience when doing things. Nothing in life is automatic. Again, to ask questions. Do not assume anything. Do not take anything for granted. I believe part of enhancing the entire customer service throughout the public service, there were receptions desk placed in every ministry. So you go somewhere, you ask somebody, how can I go about doing this? You write letters, you listen to the news. The information is there. What you need to do is open yourself to being receptive of information and being prepared to do the necessary work. If you have a small business to register, you need to go to companies and intellectual properties as one milestone. Then you need to go over to VAT. Then you need to bring in your documents. Then you need to ensure that you have your necessary IDs. Some of you may not necessarily have a social security card. You may have a passport. You may need 2 IDs to open a bank account. People need to prepare themselves to do the necessary work. Nothing happens instantly. Do not have the mindset about saying, oh, that's too much for me, I'm just going to back down. Because that's what happens to a lot of people. They do not have patience through the process or in the process. So when it comes to accessing certain things, they will say, well, to bring it down in later terms, Mr. Getting or Mamsel Getting, I do get. No, they've done the necessary work. That's why they have gotten it. So you need to put yourself in a position as a budding entrepreneur, as a budding farmer, someone who wants to participate in the tourism industry, to do the necessary work to get yourself there. That's my message to the public.
Thank you very much. So panelists, we have had it for the past 2 hours. It has been important to have listened to you. And the most important thing right now is that the budget process is actually ongoing. The parliamentary debates are going to start off on Monday. After the presentation, we hope to hear from the opposition parliamentarians who will give the rebuttal to the budget proposals presented by the Ministry of Finance. We take the opportunity to thank the Financial Secretary, the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Prime Minister, and all the others who have contributed to this year's budget. We're looking forward to the debate, and we hope that the discussions that we had today will certainly have an impact on the deliberations next week, and also on the final product that will come out as the 2025-2026 annual budget of the government of Dominica. We thank you for listening. We thank you, panelists, for this opportunity, and we hope we can continue to have not just discussions that are in the form of one direction to the public where we are informing them, but also in our small groups, in the associations and the various organizations across Dominica, that we can take that debate there and that they can contribute wholesomely to the whole budget process every year. I would like to indicate that budget measures introduced into a particular financial year represents the point of introduction, and I hope that they can be programmed by the various ministries, the various sector partners in the private sector and the public sector to allow for a strategy to be developed in terms of implementing those measures, and that is the whole approach to our budget discussions and our budget presentations each year. Thank you so very much, and I want to express thanks to Ivonia at DBS and the DBS team for hosting us, and we look forward to continued discussions in private and in public in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.